all of us who've been watching this have been waiting for how freaking long? It's October surprise.
My name is Brittlestar, not really.
And I'm Sandy Garacino, really.
And this is Canada Watching U.S. News. You're joining us now on an emergency podcast. Jack Smith, of course, with the immunity trial against Donald Trump, just on the 2nd of October, Wednesday, has released some information. Sandy, can you take us through this information?
Okay, let's just to clarify for everybody where things stand. So, as we know, Jack Smith, who is the U.S. Special Counsel on the prosecution of Donald Trump on a number of different allegations, criminal allegations. Trump had defended himself, claiming that he had presidential immunity and was not subject to prosecution for actions committed while he was president. And on July 1st of this year, the U.S. Supreme Court granted a form of limited immunity, saying that actions taken by the president, he's immune from prosecution for official acts as president. So now, in this action, Jack Smith has filed a brief claiming what parts of the allegations, the substantive allegations in his indictment that he says are not part of the official function of the President of the United States. And so what's happened is that just actually while we were recording the last podcast, this motion and this brief by the U.S. Attorney Special Counsel has been made public and unsealed by the judge who will be hearing the immunity application to determine. And I think this has to, there's so much complexity and it's so hard to untangle all the different prosecutions and all the different actions. But here we go. So now it is appearing. Now we're actually getting the real thing that we all of us who've been watching this have been waiting for how freaking long, Stuart, have we been waiting to hear the evidence that Donald Trump himself was personally engaged in pressure tactics and tactics to overturn the result of the election and to appoint fraudulent electors in numerous states, including Arizona, Michigan, Georgia, and many others. And as you know, there are prosecutions against people who were named and who signed on as fraudulent electors. This was a whole comprehensive scheme. Rudy Giuliani was part of this. There was a whole cast of characters that most of us have forgotten, probably all of their names. But what's coming clear in a number of these, in this now released motion, is how deeply and personally Donald Trump himself was involved in this fraudulent scheme, how much he knew that there was no basis, no foundation to his claims of fraud. There are multiple, it's detailed in quite a lot of, in significant detail, how he, in different states, he claimed that there were, thousands of dead people voting, thousands of illegal immigrants voting, tens of thousands in some cases, 32,000, 100,000, and the numbers kept changing. And Donald Trump was saying this, Rudy Giuliani was saying this, a number of other people were saying this. And now it's being clear that he knew at the time that he said it, that it wasn't true. He knew that there was going to be more examination, and in fact, more examination did take place that showed that these were all fraudulent claims, and he knew it then. And so the essence of Jack Smith's brief is that these actions relating to the fraudulent electors, that this scheme was not part of the official function of the President of the United States. The President of the United States does not have any role with respect to, any legitimate role with respect to um, declaring the winner of the subsequent election. That is a function of Congress, and it's a function of the state legislatures and the electors, the slate of electors that is signed off by either the lieutenant governor or the governor in each of the states involved. So the essence of this is that this was a very comprehensive plot, and Donald Trump was personally involved in it, personally made phone calls, personally harassed different people. He harassed people like Ronna McDaniel, who was the RNC chair at the time, who has since been kicked off. But she gave advice that she was not able to take part in this scheme. She'd had legal advice that she couldn't do that, and he still continued to try and dial her in and rope her into this scheme. So that's the essence. There's going to be so much more. And I don't know, while I've been blathering on here, Stuart, you might have been able to read some of this stuff.
Yeah, I'm reading. I've got the document open in front of me here as well, and I've made some notes. But I mean, the thing with this case is that Jack Smith he didn't want to miss. He wanted to make sure he hit as much as possible, because he had a bit of a setback a little while ago, didn't he? Where he sort of came forward, and of course the immunity, presidential immunity, was in the Supreme Court ruling. However, what's interesting is this distinction, as you said, where you've got there are no official acts relating to the Electoral College and the elections of the president. The president doesn't play a role in that, and that means it's not protected, which is some pretty fantastic semantic legal work. And it's not necessarily just semantic. It's obviously like it's legitimate, and it makes sense when you hear it. You go, of course it does. Of course you don't have any say as the president. There's no official business on deciding who gets to become president next as president. Some of the charges are wild: conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, obstruction of an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, and conspiracy against rights. And one of the interesting things people have been talking about as well is that the fact that we kind of know who all the players are already. They're all listed, P1 through P75 or something, and they're all listed. But some of the big names, of course, Donald J. Trump, Mike Pence, lots of private individuals working with Trump to further his plans.
Mark Meadows, the chief of staff.
And state officials from Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, who were targeted in attempts to alter legitimate vote counts and outcomes. Electors involved in the fraudulent electoral scheme would be individuals who allegedly coordinated by Trump and his associates to submit fraudulent electoral votes, and, of course, supporters of Trump in the January 6th riots. It's wild. I mean, it's one of those things where everyone, it's wild because it's almost like vindication in a weird sense. We'll see what happens next. I don't know what's going to happen next, but it seems like we've known this. Oh, God. I mean, we're like, what are we? We're a month out from the election. So I hope that people would.
It's October. It's October surprise.
Yeah. So it's going to be an immunity determination next, where the court will analyze whether Trump's actions during the effort to overturn the election were official presidential duties or private conduct. That's going to be harder to do now, obviously, because of the private actions determination of what was happening. There's going to be trials. It'll go on forever. Will this ever result in anything, do we think?
If Donald Trump now we are getting really to the essence of why Donald Trump is so desperate to be elected, because if he is elected, he will pardon himself and pardon everyone else who had anything to do with this, which is another form of criminal activity, but it will be an official presidential act, so he will not be subject to prosecution for what is clearly a criminal conspiracy to escape, to obstruct justice. But if Kamala Harris is elected, this is going to run its course. And, and I think in some ways, the Supreme Court, with that, it was a very controversial ruling, which is that the president is essentially a king, and he can do what he wants, or she, while being president, and as long as it's an official act. But this official act thing is gonna, this is this is a pretty wonderful case, but we'll see which way the Supreme Court skewers it and finds a way to spike it. But I think they might be in trouble here.
It's going to be difficult now that we've they've divided the whole idea of official acts and private actions, and it becomes, once they make that division, like I said, it makes it kind of clear that it's like, well, yeah, that makes sense, actually, doesn't it? You don't have to do a lot of arguing to make people go, yeah, that's not official business. That shouldn't be official business, obviously, just by the design of it.
And I mean, and just to clarify, just to sort of to flesh this out a little bit, as we all know, each state sets its own rules about voting rights. Are there going to be mail-in ballots? Are they going to allow drop boxes? All of this kind of thing. And this is all, and the Republicans fought very hard for the states to be able to run their own elections. So even though it's a federal election and it's for the president, it's different rules in every state because every state selects its own slate of electors. That's how this whole electoral college works, which is that each state runs its election. Its results are then certified, and then the slate of electors is endorsed, and then those electoral votes, they meet, and those electors vote in. They meet, I think, in December, just before Christmas, on the year of the election, and they vote, and those votes are then tabulated and taken to Washington, D.C., and placed in a box in Congress. This is part of how this all works. It is entirely and wholly a function of each of the states. And that's why there have been all of these actions going all the way up and down to the Supreme Court and back, because it's all fighting about what the rules are in each of the states. But the president has no function there. And the only body that has a function is Congress itself. The House of Representatives votes on the slate of electors, and then once those votes are counted, the electoral votes are counted, then the vice president signs off, and that is how it goes. There is no role for the sitting president of the United States, and there is no discretion for the vice president to do anything but sign off on the electoral college votes. So it's not a federal function at all.
It's like I said, Jack Smith doesn't want to miss. He wants to make sure he comes back, and I think it's a point of pride. And I can't imagine what his life's been like as well. It must be horrible. This guy probably can't go out to dinner anywhere. You know what I mean? But there's.
I bet he shaved his beard.
Probably, I would have, or dyed it or something. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because again, if you're right, if Trump wins the election, this all just kind of goes away.
This all goes away.
Doesn't win the election, I don't think it necessarily. I don't think that Trump just. I don't think it's an easy ride to charge and convict, as it were, Trump. I think that's not an easy road. I think there's going to be a lot of bumpy road ahead. For sure.
Well, I mean, one of the things that's interesting about this is that, as you remember, back in 2020, they tried to fight this all the way in every one of the states. And I think there were something like 62 or 63 applications or contests and challenges that they made in various platforms. And a number of those went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. And there was one thing, which I can't remember off the top of my head now. They lost, the Republicans won on one of these, but it was entirely marginal and had no importance and no impact on anything. But they lost like 62 out of 63 challenges that they made all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. They failed to be granted leave on a number of those applications, and on other ones, the full bench sat and turfed it. So, but things seem to have changed in the Supreme Court recently. So it's they're hard to read now, but it's almost unimaginable that something as grotesque as this there would be immunity for this kind of conduct.
Evidence, of course, being the public statements, social media posts, fraudulent elector schemes where Trump and co-conspirators attempted to organize fraudulent slates of electors in several key states. False claims of election fraud. Testimony from state election officials is expected to demonstrate that Trump's claims of widespread fraud were knowingly false, and pressure on state officials. So there's stuff. There's stuff. We'll see what happens. It's really, it's like a terrifying reality show. It's like living next door to a reality show, isn't it? I mean,
it's white knuckle time, but finally something has, because this isn't going to get decided in a way favorable to Trump before the election. I can't imagine. She says famous last words.
Perfect way to end the emergency podcast. Thanks for listening to the emergency podcast of Canada Watching U.S. News. CanadaWatchingUSNews.com. Go sign up and you get all of this kind of fun stuff. Take care.
Thanks, Stuart. Bye.
The audio version of Canada Watching U.S. News was produced, engineered, and edited by Owen Reynolds. The video version of the podcast was edited by Lisa Cumming. Our theme music is by Owen Reynolds. You can find past episodes and more at CanadaWatchingUSNews.com or your favorite podcast platform.